Okay, I think we're live. So
Okay. All
anyway,
right, man.
thank you again for taking the time to do this. I do appreciate it.
I'm just apologize for keeping pushing back on you. It's just scheduling stuff like that. Well, I'm sure you're a busy person. You know how that goes for yourself as well. So
Sure.
yeah.
So I don't know. I guess we'll just go ahead and get into it. So on Black Adam, overall, what were your thoughts on it in general?
I on let's see. I liked it way more than I thought I would. I still think it's relatively as far as movies go. It's just it's an okay flick. But
Right.
when you're like me, did not really caring much about it at all. That's not bad. I had if we could get into some more specifics, but overall, I rated about a six and a half, something like that. Just for me
Yeah.
personally,
See, that's
which is
about where I put it
thought
too.
it was
I
pretty
would
good.
think like a 7 out of
Mm-hmm.
10, something like that.
Sure.
Um, as far as the performances, now the thing that surprised me about the movie was that Black Adam was like the most uninteresting character in the movie. It's weird, because Dwayne Johnson, of course, he has this bigger than life image, and his The Rock personality, is like got all this charisma and everything, and it just seemed like that was absent here. I think what he was doing is he was trying to go for this kind of stoic warrior type of thing, maybe, but it just seemed like he was just kind of sleepwalking through this movie.
I'm not his biggest fan, but in this
Hmm.
one, I think he was. But I don't know really how you. I'm not sure you played this character in this movie any other way, so it didn't really bother me that much. I mean, characterization wise, he's not a character that I've really been the biggest fan of anyway. So yeah, I mean, but I definitely hear what you're saying on that. He's just sort of, he's there, and again, I thought he did okay, but no, it wasn't like again, the guy's not really one of the greater, more stellar actors out there, is he?
Right. And there's a significant difference. I mean, he's not playing the Black Adam in the comics, basically.
No.
And because like in the movie when he gives up his powers, when he willingly
Uh-huh.
gives up his Shazam powers, that's not something Black Adam would do. And at the end
No.
when he kind of has this opportunity to claim that throne, the throne of Kondak or whatever, and he decides not to. Again, that didn't seem like something the Black Adam in the comics would do. It seemed like
No.
this Black Adam, he wasn't self-interested enough, and he isn't egotistical enough and arrogant enough.
Yeah, he was. He's again, like you say, it's not certainly not the iteration of Black Adam that has been portrayed over the past, well, I guess, 20 years or so in comics. Um, people, that's the thing. When people kept talking about how The Rock needs to play Black Adam, The Rock, and all that stuff was going on even before he started hearing about it back in the early aughts or whatever. When I was seeing that, I was going, oh, I mean, they're just saying that because they think he looks sort of like him. I mean, why do you think this guy can embody really any particular character or even the character traits from Black Adam? And they were just strictly going, as sometimes is done with this dream casting of characters, basing it, it seemed to me, primarily on, you know, uh, appearance.
I think part of it was because of his role as the Scorpion King. I think there's some similarities there where you had this
Yeah.
character who lived in the ancient world in that Middle Eastern area, and he's this guy who's sort of betrayed and has the sort of tragic backstory. And I think because of that character and some broad similarities to Black Adam, I think they kind of lumped them together somewhat, and that's kind of where that comes from.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Like I said, they again, I think people kind of tend to do that. Well, because as you sure you're well aware, the whole dream casting thing that fans do, which is nothing wrong with it. I mean, I've always thought it was kind of based on if a guy seems to be at the type of superheroes, comic book characters it's a very visual medium,
Right.
and thus people are seeing the visuals first. So if they think somebody kind of fits the role or looks sort of like that character, again, that's all I think we're seeing here is why he got it, why people were just going rock, 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 and they finally got back to him and he decided, yeah, I could play that character. So yeah, that's what we're looking at here. And no one really thought about, wow, he's a great actor. He would just make such a good Black Adam. They just thought he looks like him. That's it.
Hmm. And I think because of his popularity, I think that's part of the reason why I think they kind of toned down the character, where he's not basically he's not as unpleasant a character in
Right.
this movie as he is in the comics. I think I'd compare it to like when by the time Arnold did Terminator 2, he had become a big star, and so they didn't want him to be just the soulless killing machine anymore. So they made him kind of into a good guy. And I think it's kind of a
Mm-hmm.
similar thing.
Agreed. Definitely. I definitely see that.
I really would like to see a Justice Society movie after seeing this.
Yeah.
Actually, it's funny because I enjoyed The Rock as Black Adam a lot less than I thought I would, but I enjoyed the Justice Society characters a lot more than I expected to. Pierce Brosnan as Dr. Fate was great. In fact, he's the best thing in the movie. That's my main complaint is there's not enough Dr. Fate in this movie.
Yeah.
But I think actually that the other actors, playing Hawkman and Atom Smasher and Cyclone were actually quite good and enjoyable in their roles too. These characters have all been race flipped. They're all Caucasian in the comics. And yeah, I prefer if they were like that. But in the movie's defense, it's not like they made the change in race a big deal where I mean, the movie's not woke in that sense. It's not like, I don't feel like it's pushing an agenda or anything. It's pretty much just a popcorn movie that's there to entertain. And I did think that the various actors, Aldous Hodge, I think he's the one that played Hawkman. I thought he actually
Yes.
did pretty well as Carter Hall. I thought the characterization of the character was pretty good. He's aggressive and kind of a hard ass, but at the same time, he's also kind of this old school hero where he's opposed to killing and stuff like that. And that felt very right to me.
Yeah. I think that's what really made me at least well disposed towards the film. First of all, yeah, it was not other than the casting was certainly woke. But that was typical Hollywood box ticking woke
Right.
garbage that really you don't blame actors for one way or another. They're not comics geeks who will go, oh no, I refuse to play this role because it's a race swap and I like that character too much. And
Right.
they're
Yeah.
not gonna do that. They're gonna get the gig. I liked him. Again, he's not the captain. He's not the Hawkman from the comic. I'm certainly opposed to that kind of casting, and even with Cyclone. But if that, I could easily just go, hey, not watch the movie. And then again, can't watch too many movies today at all if you go by that. So that said, you still have to judge him by his performance and how the character is handled. And I think he's really good, and she's okay. And again, none of the characters act like they're working off of a woke script, which is good. And in
Mhm.
fact, what endears me to the movie the most is its focus on heroism, not necessarily its title character, of course. His is more of a redemption arc
Yeah.
about a guy who turns out to be not so bad, not, whereas the Justice Society go in there and Hawkman is constantly telling him, you're a bad guy. You're not a hero, and we're here to take you down. And the constant focus of the film is about being a hero and redemption. So those themes, if anytime those themes are absent from a so-called superhero movie, to me, I'll never be into it thoroughly. I'll always have a problem with it because those themes you cannot separate those themes from your basic superhero story. I'm not saying in Elseworlds has to always be that way or other ones, but for me, if you take those out of any kind of superhero story, that means you're doing deconstruction story rather than a superhero story.
Hmm. Yeah, you're absolutely right on the whole redemption arc and all that. And that was one thing I kind of had an issue with in the movie is, when he first appears and then Waller calls the Justice Society and why them and not the Suicide Squad. I guess they were busy.
Busy.
But I mean, the Justice Society, they go in pretty hot. I mean, they basically go in and they're like, we're taking you to prison. They're really kind of throwing their weight around when they first arrive. And I was like, you're being kind of dicks here.
They
But
are.
at the same time, it's such a superhero trope. The
Right.
characters meet and they fight. And then, of course, the other villain shows up and they have to team together. So it's just kind of baked into the genre.
One of the things that doesn't make sense, because again, it's a fairly innocuous, relatively enjoyable movie that maybe gets a little headache inducing after a while. Gets very kind of Michael Bayish in some ways, but for the most part, I don't mind it because it has, again, like it has those themes that should always be in a superhero movie. So that's cool. But a problem is if you go too deep into thinking of it, which is probably never really a good thing with some of these movies, why in the hell can Intergang be allowed to control a whole country and no one do anything about it? I mean, the Intergang, of course, I'm not saying these guys even know that, but Intergang's, supposedly run by Darkseid. They're not a government. How are they allowed to take over a country? And then Waller decides, hey, somebody's rocking the boat with Intergang. You guys better go take care of that. Well, hey, I know she's worried about a global threat though. But still,
Right.
I'm like, he's fighting the country's run by criminals.
Yeah, I mean the Intergang, they were obviously, I think, kind of like a substitute for some of these modern day sort of mercenary groups like Blackwater or whatever it's called, that
Right.
we used during the.
Notice they weren't a government; they were just a gang. Like, which is they were running a country. They were like a gang, which was weird, to be honest.
Yeah, the actors that played Cyclone and Atom Smasher, I thought were actually quite good in their roles, and the battle between them and Black Adam, for the most part, I thought was pretty good. Although I did think it was kind of funny how the character of Cyclone, of course, she's been race flipped to a young black woman, and she's a scientific genius,
Of
and she
course,
loves science.
there's
It's just
always
like,
going to be the woke trappings, dude. It's still Hollywood, so yeah.
yeah, it's like every young black female character in comics now is like a genius.
Right.
But I thought
Yes.
that they realized their powers pretty well. Atom Smasher was obviously kind of in the mode of like Peter Parker, where he's kind of the younger, sort of inexperienced, the kind of OG whiz character who's kind of in awe of everything that's happening and really wants to impress
Right.
the veteran heroes and all that.
Yeah, some of the actions. The thing is, yes, he's those actors are fine. Those young actors are fine in this. They're good. They're serviceable. Could have been interchangeable with any other members of the JSA. In fact, I think it'd have been better if they had more. I know that would have maybe taken up
Yeah.
some time, but just 5 JSAers to go deal with this global threat. I mean, wow, okay, but they were fine. He was very similar to Tom Holland. I did get a real kick out of him. We don't know if we're spoilering much, but I got a kick out of Fonzie. I got a kick out of Henry Winkler as Al Pratt, the original Golden Age Adam, his uncle.
Yeah, that was one of my notes
funny
to talk about. It's like, why is Henry Winkler even in this movie? I mean, that scene was pretty throwaway. I don't know why you needed it.
I just thought they thought it would be cute, which is it was kind of cool if you're pardon the pun, and that is a pun if you know Fonzie. I was expecting that he should have been wearing a black leather jacket. That would have been even better. And then he'd say, hey, just want to say, wish you luck. Hey.
It would be funny to just try to find, like go to the theater and find some young kid who's watching this movie and try to convince them that guy was in the 1970s. That guy was the coolest guy in America,
And nowhere near as short as we find out he is in real life, which made sense for him to be the Atom, really, because Al Pratt was very short, the original Atom. So that was kind of, but yeah, I don't mind stuff like that. It's kind of cute. I mean, you may or may not know I'm not the biggest Snyder fan out there. Without going too far deep into that rabbit hole, I'll simply say that the action sequences are all Snydery. Most of them are, maybe not all, but most of them are with the slow motion-y stuff, which I don't hate that. Like, I mean, at least that's my least problem with Snyder, but it's the 15th time he does it. I'm kind of like, oh, all right, okay, dude, I get it. You love Snyder's action. However, Snyder wouldn't have had any of the heroic good stuff in there either. So that's something that is at least an innocuous, fairly straightforward, entertaining movie that isn't full of pessimism and nihilism and all that kind of garbage.
The final battle had kind of a Snyder kind of feel to it. But I
Yeah.
enjoyed that most of the action in the movie actually takes place in the daytime. You know, there's not a lot of scenes where everything's dark and everything's kind of grimy
Yes.
and
Also, not very. That's not very Snydery. That is something again where this movie deviates from being full on Snyder. Is you got like you say you have some of the whether you're into superhero fight scenes or not, and people are probably kind of tired of them these days. It seems at least a lot of them take place like you just in the daytime. A lot of the action, and there's a lot of it. There's some would say they're almost Michael Bay levels of headache-inducing action, and I can kind of understand if they say that. But at least it is in the daytime. A lot of the time, it's fairly well lit. You can see it, and it's not really maybe a little over the top, but it's not a it's serviceable to the so-called the very thin plot of the film.
yeah, I think so. What did you think as far as the overall plot of it? I mean, you mentioned it is a redemption arc, and I agree. Did you think it all held up or made sense?
Yeah, again, now I'm someone who, to me, Black Adam, the character. By the way, I have a big qualm with the way they handled the acknowledgments of the end credits for credit, but that's not content related. To me, Black Adam is a character who was a pretty good Captain Marvel villain. And when I say Captain, I mean real deal Captain Marvel who says Shazam. It's a shame you have to go that far to explain it these days. But
Right.
he appeared like one time in the Golden Age, and he came back in the Bronze Age when DC purchased the rights to do Captain Marvel comics under the auspices of Shazam. The title was Shazam, and he brought him back a few times in that. And then later, Roy Thomas, and then later, I believe in the JSA title, later Jeff Johns and others, mostly Johns, changed him so just absolutely radically from that he became a completely different character, became sort of an anti-hero. He was in the JSA, as you're well aware.
Right.
At that point, I really don't have a whole lot of interest in that version of the character. I mean, that was an okay. John's at JSA runs fine. I have nothing against it. It was a good comic, and it's just that Black Adam never really. I read a bunch of comics with him in it. I read some of the 52 that he was in, all that stuff, and he was never particularly my bag one way or the other. So I had no dog in the hunt. And I have found classic comics that sometimes when I go see a comic book related film, in the rare instance when it's about a character that I really didn't read their comic much or wasn't a big fan one way or the other. And like I said, nothing against them either, just something wasn't really one that I was, attached to, which was rare for me. I usually enjoy those movies a little bit, which again, it sounds a little selfish, but when I don't have a big dog in the hunt, like I've gone to see movies, and then I would find out from the fans that they were pissed off about certain things that went on. And I go, oh, well, I hear you, because that happened to my characters too. So I hear you. But in this case, I didn't really know that because I didn't read that comic much.
Like Men in Black or something like that.
Yeah, Men in Black was based on a comic that I'd seen at Malibu. I think actually, and just never really read it. Like the movie, Hellboy. I have every respect for Hellboy fans of Mike Mignola. I'm not the big Mike Mignola guy. So I went to see Hellboy cold. I really hadn't read any of the comics. I knew about him, and I liked the movie. Most people did too. Don't get me wrong. It's not like fans hated it, and it's happened to me a few times. And when I would, I go, when I don't have a lot of stake in it, it seems a little bit easier for me. And this could be a case like that, where I don't really. If I go see a Black Adam movie and I don't have a horrific time, I'm fine.
Yeah. Of course, when the character was revived at DC in I believe it was the early '60s, wasn't it?
It was into the late '70s when they brought him back. When it was around the mid '70s when DC got the Shazam or the Captain Marvel license back, but they couldn't really call him Captain Marvel because Marvel had hold of that. So they called the title Shazam. They created the comic, and they sold the live action TV show to Filmation. And around, I think it was actually Shazam number 28, which is 1977 or 78 or whatever, where they brought Black Adam back. But before that, he'd only been in one comic, Marvel Family number 1, which this week at comic shops, they just came out with a replica of that, by the way.
Oh, really?
These replica comics, they do facsimiles. I don't know if you're familiar with those.
Right. Yeah, they do reproductions of like
Well,
key
yeah, that's the whole
issues.
comic. Yeah, they've been doing Marvel DC been doing that for a few years. They're kind of fun. It's like for $5 you get a complete, not just a reprint, but a complete replica of the ads and everything that was book and that book was. And I actually have a copy of that new one, the Marvel Family #1, and it has the first appearance of Teth Adam. But before that, back in the early '70s, as a kid, I had a book called Shazam from the '40s to the '70s, and
Oh yeah.
that story was in there. So I've known about Black Adam even before they brought him back in the late '70s. So
Yeah, I hadn't read a whole lot with Black Adam before, probably before he joined the Justice Society. I mean, I knew of the character, of course, and had read him
mhm.
here and there. You know, he appeared in some Shazam comics, like you said. He was in Crisis, I think, briefly, but it was in that JSA run where I first really got regular exposure to the character. And yeah, Johns did kind of reinvent him. It's something he's done with a few characters. Like he's done similar things with Sinestro. He takes a character who's, you know, a pretty straightforward villain and then kind of
Mm-hmm.
tweaks him to make him more, not necessarily a good guy, but where his motivations, you kind of understand his motivations and why he does what he
Right.
does.
He fleshes him out a little bit.
Yeah, and I personally quite enjoyed his take on Black Adam, as I think I've said. You know, he kind of made Black Adam into like Marvel, DC's version of Namor, where he's this kind of arrogant
Yes, he
ruler
did.
who, you know, and it makes him a bit of a wild card because sometimes he may side with the villain, sometimes he may not. You know, it kind of depends on his, you know, on his own interest, basically. And I thought that was interesting.
Yes, and this movie is a bit more of a streamed down, simplified version of some of that. And he's like I think you pointed out, he doesn't really, his characterization is not exactly like it is in the John's comics, and it's
Yeah,
nothing like the one from the older comics,
right.
but or his earlier issues. But it's serviceable for this film, and there is a, without going into spoilery detail that much, there's a decent twist especially if you're someone that doesn't know the character. But I was shocked by it because I read this. I knew they were going to do this, but there are a lot of people that really don't know the character too well. That will be something but I think a reveal toward the end will be something of a shock for them. Hey, look at our buddy Loki.
Hey,
Hey,
Loki's
man,
here.
good to see
Hey,
you, buddy.
Loki. Thanks for showing up.
Hey, man. I hope you guys had a good time at the con this weekend. Yeah. Oh, you saw him at the con? You got to see Loki?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
He came here to basically to my backyard, pretty much, and
Nice.
we hung out at
Oh,
a
wow.
bar and arcade called Free Play near here on Friday. I
Oh.
drank way too friggin' much. I was
Uh-oh.
way hungover the next morning.
Well, you guys had a good time, though, huh?
Yeah, and then we had
Nice.
well, they went to this retro con. I think
Oh,
I
Saltapalooza, Geekapalooza, or whatever it
yeah,
is. What is it?
Retropalooza. I
Retropalooza.
didn't go. He's like I wasn't feeling up to it. But then
Oh, I
that
got
night
you.
we had a little viewing. We all got together and watched Wrath of Khan. There was
Nice.
I don't know what was that. I think there was about 12, 15 of us
Oh,
maybe.
okay.
But
Well, that's
Loki
great.
was there.
Mexican Iron Man?
Mexican Iron Man was
Oh,
there.
Mike. Hey.
Nick
Cool.
from Echo Base Network,
Oh, all
Psycho
right,
Dwarf
man.
9, Dave Bob and his
Hey,
wife were
Bob.
there.
That's great, man.
Apollome's Minion was
Really?
there.
Apollo was there. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
You got to
and
meet
her
Apollo.
mother.
I love Apollo. You should see that picture she gave me. I'll have to show it to you one day.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a fun time. And as long as you're here, Loki, thank you again for setting that up.
That's
And
fantastic. Loke,
the next
cool.
time y'all want to do it, let me know, and I can
Yeah,
help kind of get things
right.
prepared.
That's fantastic, man. That's great. Um, but yeah, I think, like I said, I guess like I haven't liked any of the any of the DC movies. I've just liked some, disliked some less than others. But this one, it has. Again, I can't argue for it being particularly good or saying, hey, you got to go rush out and see it. But what I can say is, it has some elements that certainly aren't in any of the Snyder garbage. Like again, I like Pierce Brosnan. I
Yeah.
liked him as Dr. Fate. I'm really not sure what they were thinking of with that helmet. I mean, he looks good. Don't get me wrong, but Doctor Fate's helmet should have eyes.
Yeah, there are no eye holes in it. It was
What
there was
is?
one point I think where like there was some like parts glowing like
Yeah,
eyes
it's just
on
like
it.
what? I guess they were just
I don't
being
know.
stylish.
It was a little puzzling, but
Yeah.
this was one of the most, for lack of a better term, one of the most comic booky movies they've done so far. It felt very much connected to the comics and more so than the Snyder stuff.
Right.
Most of them haven't been like that, but I thought Aquaman was pretty well. Shazam was, and this one is.
Yes. And again, I like, even though again I'm just so against what they did. I'm just a Hawkman fan. And I don't really like what they did. I still like the actor. Multiple things can always be true at the same time. I can say I wish they hadn't done that with the casting, and still, if the person does a good performance, I have to say so. And I like that guy Aldous Hodge. I like Aldous Hodge. I think it is. I like the actor, and so I thought he was good, and he did act like Hawkman should. In other words, he was gung ho about, hey, you're a villain. You're killing people. We're here to stop you. He did not certainly conduct himself as a hero for most of the film, meaning Black Adam, and he was rightly pissed off and also indifferent. When he got brought back, to life or whatever, without going too far into any kind of spoilers, but he was. So a lot of the movie, he is seemingly the villain, and I thought they did a decent job with that. Again, I would personally would like a few more JSAers in the movie
Yeah,
than
that was.
5.
Yeah, I was
You know.
that way too. I was like, I wish we could have had, like Dr. Midnight
Oh yeah.
uh, or who else? Maybe Starman, would have been cool. But
You could have had one more old timer, and then maybe a couple of the youngsters again. You could have Stargirl. No, I know she's got a TV show now. Who cares? Johns, you made this movie. I mean, have your own Stargirl in this one too, or
Power Girl, maybe.
Power Girl. Oh well, hey, yeah. So, now Power Girl would have too much of a good adversary for. I mean, she could slug it out. She could come close to slugging it out with Black Adam. So I guess
that's true. Okay, so now what did you feel about the cameo at the end by Cavill?
As someone who, as much as I hate Man of Steel and Bull versus S and all that stuff, Snyder stuff, I've never had anything against Henry Cavill. I always thought, you know what, if he ever got a chance to actually play Superman proper, I think he would be great. And I think even though this is 2 seconds, whatever it is, 3 seconds, you get to see him from the waist up. So even though there's no trunks on that uniform, it was a brighter color. So we don't know if they're trunks or not, but I hope there were trunks. And he had the curl, and he looked. Here's a key thing. This is small, but this is body language. They're playing that John Williams, a hint of the John Williams music in the background, which is great.
Right.
And then he's got when he addresses Black Adam, and forgive me, I forget exactly what he said to him now. You may remember, I don't. But when he addresses him, he's got a Superman look on his face. You might think that doesn't mean much. It means something to me because if you look at his face in Man of Steel or in BBS or anything, he's just like mopey man, and he's not happy to be Superman. There's no joy. Those movies are joyless.
Right.
Well, he does look like he's got a Superman type of a look on his face, like that's really him. In other words, I see that scene, which is all of 3 seconds, maybe, whatever it is, 5 seconds. And I see more Superman in that few seconds than I did in either one of those horrible Snyder movies. So again, it may be nothing, but it certainly affected everyone. People have here. There were only 2 people in the theater when I went to see it yesterday, but in other theaters, I hear everyone cheered and clapped and stuff. So that's a pretty good scene. Whether it means we're ever going to get any more with him playing him or not, but if he got to play him, and there was some, a good director and producer or whatever, I'd be game to see Henry Cavill again. So I thought that was a pretty nice scene.
Yeah, there was some scattered applause in the theater that I was in. The theater was it was Thursday afternoon, and I think it was maybe like a third full, something like that. Not a big crowd, but there was some cheering and applause when he appeared. And yeah, I pretty much agree with you as far as how the character has been portrayed, in the Snyder films. It's just this kind of dour And I mean, and that's the problem with those Snyder films is they're just not that entertaining. They're not that enjoyable. It's, I mean, I'm in the tank for this stuff. And I'll even go. I even like some crappy superhero films, but with Superman, and particularly with Batman versus Superman, or I'm sorry, Man of Steel. I mean, it's just like a chore to sit through. It just takes so long, and there's just not much there to enjoy. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
if they can lighten the mood a little, and the thing is, if you've seen interviews with Henry Cavill, or him at
Uh-huh.
conventions, the guy's very engaging. He's got a lot of
Yeah,
charm and
he's a
a
good
lot of
dude. Yeah.
charisma, and they just refuse to take advantage of that, and I just don't
Right.
get it.
Yeah, because again, why waste such a good casting? I mean, uh, and that was similar to Brandon Ralph. I mean, he was also a waste of casting too in a terrible movie. And you go, it's a shame he didn't get another crack at it, but they had to waste it on the first one with that stupid Superman Returns. And Brian, again, I hated his costume in that, but I don't know how lucky I was because I hated it even more in Man of Steel. But yeah, it was I never Cavill was never the problem for me as a Superman fan. I see him and I go, that just makes it worse. I wish that they just cast a guy that sucks, so I wouldn't have to go. Damn, it'd be nice if he. What would he be like in a good movie? Hell, a halfway decent movie. Because look, Christopher Reeve. We all argue about Superman 2, have a lot of problems with that, but also 3 and 4, as terrible as they are, you're still seeing Christopher Reeve play Superman. He's so
Yeah.
great. Even in bad movies, he's great.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good example right there. Like Superman 4 is like crap.
Oh, it's
It's not
horrible.
good.
But he's so
But
good as Superman.
but you know what? If that's on the TV, I'll sit and watch it.
Yeah.
But if Batman and versus Superman is on, I'm just kind of like, I don't want to. It takes too long.
And BVS has a good example of, you watch the beginning of the early moments or early half or whatever that film. One of the biggest problems, because it's bad enough. I'm bad enough with Man of Steel, but the only heroism in Man of Steel was the few scenes when he's actually Clark Kent, when he saves the guys on the oil rig. He saves the kids in the bus, and every time the movie poo-poos on it by having Paul Kent say maybe you shouldn't have done that. And in other words, the movie laments him doing that. When he's wearing the costume, bad as it is, he never acts like Superman. He just punches things. I think he saves like one guy from a helicopter or something, but for the most part, he's not rescuing people and in being joyous. He's just punching people who were trying. Remember, he only fights Kryptonians because they're coming after him. He doesn't give a crap about anybody. And then you get the next movie, and for a couple of years between Man of Steel and BVS, you had guys like Joss Whedon and other people criticizing Zack Snyder for saying, look, dude, Superman's, kind of supposed to help people and save people. And he's this. So Snyder doesn't listen. He just hears the criticism and says, okay. So there are a bunch of scenes that, if you notice, there's a montage at the beginning of BVS where he's running around like rescuing people and stuff. But look at the look on his face.
Right.
Like the show scene where he saves people from a flood, and he makes it weird by having them all like acting like they're worshiping him from God or something. And he saves these people in some tribe, and they're all like acting like he's a god. And every time he's saving a battleship, that should be glorious. But he's pulling this battleship with a chain. He's got this look on his face like, man, it really sucks to be Superman. Why me, man? There's never any. Superman used to derive joy from helping people and saving people.
But
Snyder didn't understand that.
Constipated a lot of the time.
He's Mopey Man in that movie. So even when he's performing heroics, it's hollow because he looks like he'd rather be doing something else. And that's not Superman.
Right. With Snyder, I think, he doesn't have a whole great grasp of these characters. I think that what draws him to it, or did draw him to it, was just a lot of the visuals. I think he read maybe Watchmen and maybe Dark Knight Returns,
and Heavy Metal was his favorite comic. So yeah.
Oh really?
And
I think a lot of stuff he just puts it on screen because he's like, "Ooh, that'll look cool," And
yeah, well, he said that. Yeah.
Yeah, and because I think that's part of the problem with directors now, and because it seems like a good example, and I don't mean to touch a sore subject, but JJ, with the first JJ movie. Of course, there's that scene where Kirk drives up to where they're constructing the starship, and it's sitting there on the ground in the middle of Iowa or wherever, and it's like, what is it doing on the ground? Wouldn't they be building it in space? Because we've seen they construct ships in space before. And I
Right.
remember hearing or reading somewhere where he saw a Star Trek calendar that had that image on it. It was like, oh, that looks cool. So he just stuck it in the movie, even though it doesn't really make any sense. And I
Yeah,
think there's a
because
bit of a
yeah,
problem with directors doing that. Oh, that looks cool. It doesn't make any sense, but let's do it anyway.
that's what happens when you get somebody who doesn't really understand or care about the material. I mean, at least the only credit I'll give Jar Jar Abrams is he flat out admitted it both before and after the film was made when he says, "Yeah, I was never really a Star Trek fan," but actually, so did Snyder because in interviews before, right when he was given the gig by Christopher Nolan, who didn't want to direct it. So he gave it to Snyder, who'd done Watchmen, and in my opinion, made some bad mistakes on it. But anyway, at least that was supposed to be deconstructing superheroes. He said he was on record as saying, "Yeah, I always thought Superman was a bit of a dork." And in other words, well, you know what? If you feel that way, that's your opinion. You're entitled to it. But maybe you're not the guy to be directing a Superman movie. Call me crazy, call me radical. But if a guy has no respect, like Richard Donner, wasn't much of a comic guy, but he knew who Superman was and he respected. He said he took that terrible Mario Puzo script and rewrote it because he said, "No, this script does not treat Superman with respect. He is an icon." And at that point, this was mid 1970s. At that point, Superman had only been around for like, if you think about it, like 30 something, 40 something years.
Yeah,
And that was enough for him. He was already an icon in the mind of a very experienced, actually was not super experienced, but he'd been around a little bit. Richard Donner, a director who'd been around a bit, and he decided to treat the character with respect. Whereas the idiot Christopher Nolan, and he is an idiot, hired a guy who admitted that he had no respect for the character. I liked Watchmen. I read Watchmen. I liked the Frank Miller Batman. I liked, I read Heavy Metal. And Superman, he's he's a dork. Well, you know what, dude? You're a dork. And don't touch Superman. But he took the gig, and he proved that he had no respect for him.
Well, a director or what have you doesn't necessarily have to be a fan of the material. Nicholas Meyer's a perfect example. He didn't know anything about Star Trek before doing Wrath of Khan, but he took it upon himself to learn, and to educate and kind of become knowledgeable on it so that he could do work. And Christopher Nolan's another one. He didn't know anything about Batman before he took on the character, but he made it a point to try and learn. And it seems like that's what's missing, is that these people, directors or creators today, they just aren't motivated and feel like they don't need to learn that stuff or get to know it well.
Yes, I always thought that Harv Bennett really kept a lot of the problem. Nicholas Meyer. Yes, I have a lot of problems with Nicholas Meyer as well. However, Harv Bennett, and he schooled themselves on Star Trek before they made that movie. Absolutely true. And Harv Bennett reined him in and kept a lot of, because Nicholas Meyer, I love the movie he directed, Time After Time.
Yes,
but he also wrote a book called The 7% Solution that he adapted to him, and that movie totally bastardized Sherlock Holmes. But at least but when it came to Star Trek, he did a good job of directing that film, and a lot of that I think was also Harv Bennett. Even Shatner and Nimoy were there. They had a lot of guidance. So again, you had a guy who was good at directing, and you had a lot of good people around him. Christopher Nolan didn't. I mean, to me, I like Batman Begins. I thought was okay. Dark Knight is okay. I hate Dark Knight Retires, but even still, those movies to me, as a Batman aficionado and freak, I call them Batman for dummies. He only got given the gig for Man of Steel because, well, he just made him $1 billion with even a bad movie like Batman Retires, as I call it. Dark Knight Retires. What was it? Dark Knight
Rises.
Rises. Yeah, I'm so used to calling it Dark Knight Retires, which he does, and I hate that movie. But that still made billions, $1 billion. So they hired him to do Superman. He was like, "Well, yeah, I don't really want to do Superman, but I'll hire somebody." And he hires Snyder, and there we go. We get in, and he hires a guy. Again, that's the mentality. You don't have to hire a guy who's a rabid fan, but if they come along saying, "I'll direct a movie about a character I don't have any respect for," and he's a dork, I don't hire him. How about find someone who has proper respect for the character. But again, I understand that's an old-fashioned notion.
Well, I'm sure because Snyder had already done Watchmen at that point.
Yes, he
And I'm
had.
sure, I'm sure if they asked him, like, do you know the character? Do you like it? He's just going to tell them what they want to hear. That's
He,
pretty much how
but
Hollywood
he
works.
didn't. He told him that he didn't really respect the character. Besides, Watchmen didn't make a lot of money either. So that's another thing. It's not like, yes, he made 300, which made a good bit of money, I guess. But Watchmen did not make money. I mean, did not do particularly well. And, what's his face hired him anyway. And then Man of Steel woefully underperformed. And so, by the way, did BVS. So they didn't learn their lessons with him because he's making BVS after another such a bad performance from my Man of Steel that they had to stick Batman in the movie. And yet they still signed him while that was going on to do what would later become Justice League, then later his cut later. So
Right.
This is all Warner's fault. You kept hiring a guy who was underperforming. BVS pretty much had its arse handed to it by Civil War just a few weeks after it came out. Theoretically, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry. But I was going to say, it's an issue, because you talk about them hiring Snyder and sort of doubling down again and again on that type of storytelling. And it's been something that I've seen, and I don't remember where it first started, but I think it was in the 90s when there was like talk of doing a new Superman at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I would see interviews or comments with, producers or whoever with Warner Brothers, and it'd always be, well, we want to go darker. We want to go darker with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they did Superman Returns. It failed. Oh, and then afterwards, we need to go darker. Then Green Lantern fails. We need to go darker. And then Man of Steel disappoints. We need to go darker. BVS disappoints. We need to go darker. And it's like, okay, well, how much further do you want to take this? It's not the answer to everything. Some characters can work if you make them darker and grittier, but Superman is not one of them. With Superman. Batman, you could do that. With Daredevil, Moon Knight, Punisher, Nightwing, or Green Arrow can even work that way. But basically the more street level and more kind of human characters. But when you get into demigods and myths like Thor, could you do a dark and gritty Thor? You could, but I don't think it would be that enjoyable or do that well.
Right. You just don't need to make him a buffoon like Ragnarok and Love and Blunder did, but. But they've gone the other way. But so no, I'm absolutely right. I mean, theoretically speaking, you should be able to a movie called Batman. First of all, it should be World's Finest with Batman and Superman, something like that. I remember I was working at a relatively a very big plant, a printing plant at the time, back right leading up to that thing coming out. And normies, right? I mean, sure, you've worked with normies before. So I was, because we all know it was a comics geek and all that other kind of stuff, and I was even doing my show back then. I would always get the questions about different superhero movies and science fiction movies coming out. So this is what I would usually get when the people were starting to read about it or see, trailers and in the months leading up. This is what I would commonly get. Hey, Mike, what is this? What does it mean, Batman versus Superman? I don't understand. I thought they were friends or something. You know how many times I got that? And I was like, the director's an idiot. And they don't know they don't really get that kind of, that's inside geek baseball stuff. I say the director's a moron who doesn't understand it. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, this is why are they fighting? I thought that's what Joe Normie, thought. They think Batman and Superman are superheroes who are friends. Why is it versus? And I'm like, dude. So I would say, look, I hear you, but there's idiots making this movie. And theoretically speaking, classic comics, you should, in a movie with the words Batman and Superman in the title, theoretically, you should be able to make a movie with those two guys playing tiddlywinks for 3 hours and trip over $1 billion. And they couldn't even do that.
Right. Yeah. And that was, I think, that was the expectation. This thing's going to make it big because, Dark Knight Dark Knight Rises and The Dark Knight had cracked $1 billion just a few years before.
Yep.
But I think, like I say, it's just it's the people at Warner Brothers. They've been obsessed with this, and then of course in the last few years they've got a new obsession, which is this wokeness, which we won't go off on all that because fortunately it's not a big part of this movie.
No, fortunately it's not.
So do you think Cavill's Do you think that's going to help? Do you think that's going to reverse Warner Brothers' fortunes?
Well, you do have what's Zasloff in there now,
Hmm.
who does seem to be making some. I mean, made a pretty good call. Probably what was a pretty good call with banning that Batgirl fiasco. Didn't he push? We'll see. Here's what's gonna that might, but we're gonna have to see. Here's what we'll probably determine. We're gonna have to see how he deals with this Flash problem and this Aquaman 2 problem.
Hmm.
Because then he's got the next one coming out. I don't even know when it is. Maybe the Shazam 2 thing coming out, which
Um, I think originally it was going to be coming out, I think in November, but I think they've pushed so many of their
pushed it
movies
back, right?
back, and I think
Yeah,
part of it is because of this movie, and they're pivoting away from all that stuff that the previous regime was doing. So
right.
they've got to do reshoots and stuff. It's going to
Yeah,
cost them a fortune.
yeah, and there you go. So I don't know. I think they've got he's got a lot of work to do. This movie was made before he really came into power, so we'll see. He does seem to be what I don't really know much about him. I don't follow the stuff like a good buddy Tom does or some of those guys at Midnight Says. I'm not really into the whole inside baseball stuff on that, but my vibe from some of the things I've heard a lot of them talk about is yeah, he does seem to be interested in trying to get things on track. For example, they just took another project away from Jar Jar Abrams. One of those other stupid things he wanted to do. God, I can't remember what it was off the top of my head, but I saw something for it today. I think maybe I don't know if you saw it today or yesterday, where it
I
says
haven't.
He lost another project that he was planning, and
Well,
they need
I
to take all of his projects away from him. They've already taken away that stupid Superman movie he wanted to do away from him. I think.
well, I saw some headline the other day saying that Superman he was going to do with Michael B. Jordan was still in the works, which
Um,
surprised me.
it's in the works the same way Ryan Johnson's new Star Wars movies are in the works. That's what I think on it because he just took something away from him. I forgot what it is now. Good Lord, I saw something the other day where they took one of them and they look. I just I don't think they're going to let him do much. I think they wasted a lot of money on him. They went like $500 million to that idiot. But what have we seen? And that's been a couple of years now, like what a year or two
Yeah,
that Jar Jar Abrams was hired. What has come out that he's not doing anything? He's
yeah.
planning things.
They
He's
might as well have
planning
burnt that
things.
money.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is the moron who wanted to hire Ta-Nehisi Coates to do a Superman movie.
Yeah.
It's just obviously he was going to be naturally he was going to be black Superman, and how's that working out for you? If that is such a big project that's in the works, why did they let Henry Cavill pop in at the end of Black Adam? That to me tells me that I think Zaslav let that happen because he wants to kind of maybe it's a trial balloon. Maybe he wants to test the waters. And even if Black Adam isn't like the biggest hit ever, I think that has gotten a lot of people excited. Remember, you know how I don't trust Rotten Tomatoes; are garbage, but it looks to me like critics are. This is such a typical dynamic. Critics are hating Black Adam, but it looks like the people response is pretty favorable.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, I don't hardly even listen to critics anymore. And I think
Oh,
the
I don't
main
either.
reason they're rating it so low is because, like we
It's
said,
not woke enough.
this movie is like, yeah, it's not pushing an agenda, it's not pushing ideology, it's not really pushing wokeness, despite the changes in the casting. And I think
Yeah.
that's why they don't like it, and that's why they're bashing it.
Who was it? Someone just said something pretty stupid about the movie, saying it was uh it's all about like again. Oh, there was someone look that I usually like said something about this movie is all about the white guy being the baddie again, which is usually what Hollywood does. But I would beg to differ. I mean, there were the only white guys in this movie, other than a couple of heroes, like the two superheroes of the Justice League, or some intergang mercenaries that are working for a primary villain who's not white.
I mean, they do, there are a couple of times where they
A couple
talk about
lines.
where some of the characters complain about foreigners occupying their country, but I was okay with it. I didn't think it had a problem. I thought it worked fine. Yeah, and I think your description earlier of the movie is well. I think you described Dwayne Johnson's performance is serviceable, and I think that's kind of a good
Yeah.
description for the whole movie. It's a decent popcorn film to, kill a couple hours. But one thing I had forgotten to mention also is we hadn't really talked about the human characters,
Yes.
the locals there, like the woman with her son and the villain also. What did you think of them as far as their performances?
The villain's pretty much non-existent. Let's face it. I mean, he's just there because you're supposed to. Again, I guess we're getting spoiled. I hate to do that.
Mhm.
You're supposed to really think of Black Adam as the main villain for most of the film. So, or no, I know they don't call him Black Adam ever. Spoiler, but anyway, I heard a lot of people that didn't like the woman. I thought she was fine, of course, obviously because she's also a cutie. She's supposed to be Isis later, if there's ever more.
Yeah, so in the
Um,
comics,
in the
that
comics, is Isis,
character,
right?
she becomes Isis, and her
Yeah.
son actually becomes a character called Osiris. He's kind of like Captain Marvel Jr. to Black
Right.
Adam. What was it? Was it 95 or 96? I think when they did that 52 miniseries, the weekly series
That
of
was
that
like
year.
maybe 05, 06, somewhere up in there
Yeah,
or
it was.
whatever. I
It
bought every
was,
one of those. I can't tell you why, but I bought every issue like an idiot. And I even bought Countdown. I don't know why.
and I
I
think
was
that was
buying them.
where they started, didn't they? Or did they start in JSA? Remember?
I think JSA,
In
but
JSA,
I
okay.
could be. My memory never trusted. So
I was gonna say, but those characters, they did the new 52 and 20 with Flashpoint and all that in 2011, and since then, I don't think they've
yeah,
even used those characters. So I don't know if they're
right.
still part of continuity or not. And of course, they're doing another reboot beginning next year. So who the hell
Oh,
knows?
of course. Well, as far as those characters, though, I liked the kid. I thought it was okay. I mean, again, he was. I've heard some people say that they didn't like the mom because she was. They thought she was annoying, and all she wanted to do was save her kid. When it was really kind of, hey, we're all going to be killed if you give them the crown thingies to the guy who would be Sabak. But that said, I thought the kid was pretty cool. I thought he did a decent job. I liked her fine. The human characters were there. They were relatively serviceable. Her brother was just kind of a dopey character.
Yeah,
They're just, but they're okay. Kid's fine. He acted like a kid. He acted like, and I actually thought he was better, a little bit better than fine. I think he was pretty good because he became sort of I would say sort of a primary motivational muse for Teth Adam in the film.
right. Yeah,
He
he's sort
became,
of the
yeah,
kid kind of becomes his anchor, sort of
he
that he
becomes
sort of
his anchor,
attaches to.
and I thought that was pretty decent. I thought that was well done.
hmm Yeah, I thought they were fine. As far as the villain, he's okay. I really haven't read much of him in the comics. I mean, I've seen images of him.
He's
So
almost non-existent, to be
yeah,
honest. There's no, but then again, in this case though, you can give it a pass because you're not supposed to think there's one.
right. And I think when he transforms, he does kind of look like a video game character, in like
Yes,
Warcraft or something, rather than a real life
it's
character.
almost like the stupid Steppenwolf from
Yeah.
not exactly like him or anything, but he kind of reminds me. I'm a little bit like, ugh, really?
And I did think now here's one thing I did have a problem with as far as the plot overall is just and again mentioning that when they get to the part where he says the name and he relinquishes his powers and then surrenders to them and lets himself be imprisoned. First of all, I don't see Black Adam doing that. I don't
No,
see him doing that
not the
at all.
comic one.
But it's just kind of pointless because he's the star of the movie, so he's not going to remain in this tank they stuck him in. So what was the point? They could have just had the point where he's like ready to surrender or something like that, and then the bad guy, transforms and they have to fight him. That would have cut a good 10 minutes out of the movie.
Hell, it felt like
You know,
30.
yeah, or yeah,
It
might have been
felt
like
like 30.
15. It seems like he
Yeah,
was floating in that water for like 10, 15 minutes.
that's where the movie gets long in the tooth, right there. In other words,
Yeah.
it's pretty good. Even if, in fact, it's I think the best sequence maybe when he finally comes clean and tells them what when we learn the truth about him, in
Uh-huh.
Justice League. Right there, I think might have been where the movie at that point, if you'd found some way for that to be a little bit more of a closer to the ending, or but then you have. I'm with you. I don't really necessarily care much for beyond that point when he goes to Task Force S being X letting himself being imprisoned. I know we're spoiling things, but I that kind of dampens the film because you know, like you just said, you know he's going to have to come back, and they
Right.
make you wait, and they make you. It seems that's where it gets a little tedious and ponderous to me because you really like. First of all, you're not fooling anybody. We know he's got to come back. So why take 3 hours? I'm just kidding. It wasn't that long. It was just, but why be so ponderous about it and make us anticipate that much when they you just it's like filler. Your movie could have been even shorter. What was it, a 2 hour runtime maybe?
Um, Let me check here. I've got IMDb up here. Let me see.
That's where the film kind of drags for me in the sense that I look, we know if you're gonna have him get put in jail, and even when he's in the water, that
Yeah.
seems too long. When you're
So
waiting for him to go to the surface.
it's right about 2 hours. It's like 2 hours, 4 minutes.
Well, that felt like that made the movie drag for me and made it feel like it was a 2.5-hour. And I know it wasn't, but
Yeah, that was just kind of a waste of time and money, really.
yeah.
Another thing that I did think was kind of funny was when Hawkman, there's a part I think where Hawkman confronts Black Adam and he says, "Heroes don't kill people."
Yep.
And I
And he
was
goes,
thinking, like, yeah,
yeah.
have you talked to Batman about that?
Yeah,
Because
that's the thing. What universe are you in? And by the way, is this the universe where with that takes place in the same universe as what's Peacemaker?
yeah, yeah, that's it.
And which it doesn't, I guess. But that's what is so confusing. We don't know. I guess this is the universe of Aquaman and Shazam, and it has a version of Superman, but it's not the same as the one with BVS and Suicide Squad and those. And it's Peacemaker. I get it's a mess, man. It's a mess.
Okay, man. Well, I think we poured over this pretty well, and we're
Yeah,
at about an hour and 15 minutes. So, I mean, if you want, we can go ahead and wrap it up here. I think
sure,
we've
man.
covered it pretty
I'm
well.
gonna go probably take a nap and everything, and or get through a little long day, man. But I tell you what, I really appreciated it, and
Oh, well, thank you for showing
we'll
up.
definitely do it again. I hope, and I'll get you to come hang out with me sometime and talk on my channel. You're probably a busy man, but get you to come hang out with me sometime.
Oh, thank
So,
you. That sounds good. Like I say, I hope to maybe start streaming regularly. And
mhm.
if this Sunday night, if Doomcock remains off Sunday, that's probably, at least for a while, is when I'll do it.
I got you. He's gonna be. I think even though he starts his Wednesday show, maybe this week. I'm not sure. I do believe I've heard something about him for Halloween. He's going to be on that Wednesday, maybe that Sunday night, but I'm not sure. But other than
I
that, he's going to like a special. But other than that, he's going to be off Sundays for a while at least.
and next Sunday's the 30th, day before, so maybe.
Oh, okay,
We'll
gotcha.
just see. So, I don't know, man. I guess I've already talked to Loki about the roundup, the comic book roundup on Wednesday. So I think I'll
Hmm.
be there for that. So I'll probably
Okay,
talk to
cool.
you then.
Thank you, man.
No problem. Thank you. Let me go ahead and end the broadcast here, and then we'll
Sure.
wrap up.